I'm making this video because there's so much negativity right now surrounding Ottawa's transit system, OC Transpo. And while people are really rightfully upset with all the cancellations and delays in the system, I do think the anger is being misplaced. Like, yeah, we're getting a 35-kilometer train that connects the east and the west, fixing the old transitway that was already operating at capacity, as well as expanding our existing train, the north-south one, all the way down to the airport, but this doesn't really tell the full story. O-train shutdowns are really well known, and they get all the media coverage, like I'm sure you're aware. But they're happening a lot less than they used to happen before, and it is improving. I can't say the same, though, for bus cancellations. 8% of buses on the most frequent routes, like the 6 and the 11, are just cancelled, or around 3% system-wide. Some routes run chronically late, starting during busy periods, getting up to 15 to 20 minutes late in some cases. Like, look at Route 7 over here. On Fridays between 4 and 7 p.m., over half of the routes are over 10 minutes late, with 25% of routes being 20-plus minutes late. If you painstakingly dig through all of the data, which OC Transpo doesn't publish themselves, there's a tool that scrapes data off of the API that we used, but you can find buses that are constantly starting their routes late and progressively just getting worse and worse at certain points in the route. This is a chronic problem affecting most of our important routes. And it's important because buses move most of the people in our city. It's literally the backbone of our transportation system, yet us transit users don't really feel that level of care over bus service. On paper, our system works pretty good. Frequent routes connect destinations and places where most people live, work, and do things, while local, infrequent buses connect the lower density suburban areas and feed them onto these more frequent routes. A major issue is that when one of these less frequent routes is cancelled, we pull a bus off one of the frequent routes, as the city doesn't have enough drivers or buses to fill the gaps. This bus swap helps riders on the less frequent route, because potentially that route might take 30 minutes and that could become an hour, which is pretty unacceptable. But in order to do this comes at the cost of reducing capacity on the frequent routes, causing delays and crowding and, at worst, skipping riders, leaving them in the cold in the middle of winter at their bus stop. And it's not unknown to us why this is happening. We know the cause of these cancellations. So operator availability, our aging bus fleet, both are things that contribute to this. But the biggest cause is car traffic. Buses delayed by traffic decimates an otherwise frequent, reliable route, ensuring that riding the bus is no better than just sitting in that very same traffic, but in your own heated or air-conditioned car. This causes people to just give up on transit. Some of those trips will then shift, moving them potentially to cars, adding more cars on an already congested road network. But the most frustrating part with all of this is that we already know solutions for this. Cities like Vancouver have made solving this issue a priority, focusing efforts on tackling the broken link. Transit priority signals, bus bulbs, queue jumps, and of course, bus lanes are proven, known solutions that get buses out of congestion. They're not high-tech, they just work. This makes the bus a better alternative to driving in traffic and gets more people using public transportation. But if we know all of this, why aren't these known, proven solutions being built here in Ottawa? Why is the alarm not being sounded? Bus priority projects like the Baseline BRT have literally been basically approved since 2016, but there doesn't seem to be any rush to start construction or put any temporary measures just to get it built right away. What's going on? So this is where we finally get to the root of the issue. The decision to spend money on improvements to public transportation is directly linked to the city budget, and the person with the most control over the budget is our mayor. Before being elected, our mayor promised that he would cap our property tax increases at 2.5%.
I've committed to limiting tax increases to 2 to 2.5%.
Far lower than any other Canadian city. This was made under the guise of affordability, but that really couldn't be further from the truth. The lack of funding into transit solutions creates a situation where residents can't rely on public transportation, pushing them to spend way more money on cars or expensive Ubers. The current property tax increase for this year was 3.9%, higher than the 2.5% proposed by the mayor, but still not enough. So let's first assume a home is valued at $500,000. An extra 1% tax increase will cost an extra $5 a month for the average household. While a single Uber ride in a single month, if you were to just take one ride, will cost you between $25 to $40, depending on where you have to go. So someone has to make an important trip because their bus was canceled or delayed or they can't rely on the system. It's going to cost them way more than whatever property tax increases would have been for them. And in the worst case, if they can't rely on public transportation, it happens to them all the time, they're going to end up spending $10,000 to $15,000 per year just maintaining their vehicle, paying for it. So this doesn't just cost them more than what it would have been just to pay for that improved public transportation, but it also adds more cars to the road, which makes the congestion even worse. The average household in Ottawa already spends around $1,000 per year on public transportation through their property taxes. So why don't we spend just a bit more to get a service that actually works? We're basically paying for a white elephant.
And keep tax increases as low as possible so we're not adding to inflationary pressures on everyone.
The argument for affordability that the mayor is making is just flawed. Capping property tax increases to a static number just to buy votes during an election is a terrible way to run a city. We also need to consider inflation. In high periods of inflation, like what happened a few years ago, the buying power of the existing transit budget will shrink even more. So even if the amount remains the same, the amount of buying power goes down. A large reason we don't see anything change is because the budget process is fundamentally flawed. The mayor's team is able to spend months in secrecy preparing a budget that city councillors only seen after it gets publicly announced. They don't even get access to a draft, with only a few weeks to pass it before the end of the year. The mayor's special committee that found these efficiencies, aka tax cuts, included cuts to things like discounted transit passes for youth and seniors, deferred important maintenance for our buses to next year. So when this draft budget gets presented in front of councillors, it starts a mad scramble to patch up as many of these holes as they can. While councillors mobilize to reverse the cuts on things like the seniors discount pass, meaningful discussions on how we can actually make a budget that can serve the city's interests are not able to be held. Changes like a transit priority plan take a lot more time to discuss and aren't possible under such a short time period. Another aspect that the mayor claims that is behind our budget issues is the lack of funding from other levels of government. He's made this claim a lot.
I don't think our residents want us to let the other levels of government off the hook for the shortfalls in transit funding and in payments of lieu of taxes.
He also left a $36 million hole in this year's transit budget, as well as deferring costs to next year, bringing the deficit for next year up to $120 million. He has this hope that another level of government is going to come bail us out, and claims that if this doesn't happen, we're going to see service cuts and other reductions.
But if we don't, we will have no choice but to look at increasing the transit levy, increasing fares, and possibly reducing service.
So, because we know this was an entirely manufactured deficit, it's completely artificial, when these cuts do happen in 2025, they'll know exactly who caused them. So, while this is a problem that the mayor created for us, there is some validity to his claim. Municipal transit operations used to be partially funded by the province of Ontario, until Mike Harris's Conservative government brought forward his so-called common sense revolution and cut all sorts of things, including transit operations for cities, social assistance, privatizing long-term healthcare, and merging cities with their surrounding suburbs, which caused a whole bunch of other issues, but we can't get into that in this video. A lot of the problems that we're experiencing today can be traced down to this historically disastrous policy, but let's focus on the transit funding piece. The province does still create and operates regional transit in the Greater Toronto Region, as well as fully paying for construction on projects like the Finch West and Eglinton Crosstown trams. The mayor argues that our rail line here in Ottawa should have the same level of treatment because Ottawa is geographically larger than any other city. And this is true. Ottawa is ginormous because of that amalgamation caused by Mike Harris. It's absolutely ridiculous how much urban sprawl has been amalgamated and merged into Ottawa. But if the mayor is so against this and thinks it's an issue, why does he continue to support low-density sprawl like Finley Creek? If we're working with such a large footprint, we should be densifying and strengthening our regional transit. But we kind of have some idea of how to improve things. Our transportation master plan already outlines a vision for regional rapid transit in our city. Rather than striving to reach this solution over decades, this is where the province and federal government can invest in making Ottawa a world-class city, one with sustainable funding and good land use. This is what the mayor should be pushing for. To break this cycle and see change, the city and OC Transpo leadership needs to present us with an honest plan on how to overhaul our transit network, especially our buses, rather than continue to work with the status quo and tell us everything is okay, making the mayor's job very easy. It's time that we demand change from those in power, and maybe stop believing the guy that runs on a platform of low taxes, promising that money will come out of efficiencies, because this historically never works and keeps us stuck in the cycle. Until that comes, though, we can start by demanding a transparent budget process. There are many groups in Ottawa that are already doing this, and I've pinned a comment that has more information below for those that want to demand change.
I have a different definition of affordability perhaps than some around the table, and I'm thinking a lot about my 24-year-old son. And what makes their life affordable is affordable, convenient, reliable transit. Programs like bike share, extensive bike networks that allow them to move around without a car, the extensive urban park network that is more than just soccer fields and tot lots, a really vibrant nightlife that is in part due to municipal funding, neighborhoods that allow people to live car-free and to live close to work and live close to school are just as safe as the neighborhoods that are further afield. And that takes municipal investment, right? All of these things are means of keeping the cost of living down that don't have anything to do with taxes.